The arguing had been going on for 40 minutes when the bull crashed through the porch railing. The Carvalho family farmhouse sat on 200 acres of Kentucky bluegrass, a property that had been profitable once, back when cattle prices were high and António Carvalho was alive to run it. Now, 6 weeks after his funeral, the house was filled with his 4 adult children who couldn't agree on anything except that someone else should make the difficult decisions. We sell. End of discussion. Beatriz Carvalho Silva, the oldest at 42, sat rigidly in their father's chair, her designer suit completely out of place in the worn farmhouse. She was a real estate developer from Louisville, and she'd been calculating property values since the moment she arrived. The market's hot. We can get $2 million, split it 4 ways, and move on with our lives. Move on? Her brother Miguel, 38, looked at her with disgust. He was the only one who'd stayed in Kentucky, teaching agriculture at the state university, wearing jeans that actually had honest dirt on them. This is Pi's legacy, our legacy. You can't just auction it off like furniture. Legacy doesn't pay property taxes, Beatrice shot back, or maintain fences, or fix the barn roof that's been leaking for 3 years. None of us are ranchers, Miguel. Face reality. The third sibling, Teresa, 35 and 7 months pregnant, sat on the couch trying to be the peacemaker. Maybe we could lease it? Keep it in the family, but let someone else manage. Lease it to who? The youngest, Rafael, only 30, interrupted from where he leaned against the doorframe. He was a paramedic in Lexington, perpetually exhausted, perpetually broke. Pi drove away every ranch hand who ever worked here. Said they were all lazy or thieves or incompetent. Who's going to want to lease a property with that reputation? That's not fair, Miguel defended. Pi had standards. Pi was impossible to work for, Rafael corrected. And you know it. Remember Joaquim Mendes? Worked here 15 years, never missed a day, knew more about cattle than Pi ever did. And Pi fired him over one bull that got sick. The room went quiet. They all remembered Joaquim Mendes. Remembered the shouting match in the driveway 3 years ago. Remembered their father's red face. Remembered Joaquim's quiet dignity as he packed his truck and left without a word of protest. That wasn't about the bull, Miguel said quietly. Pi found out Joaquim had been... A crash from outside cut him off. Then a sound that didn't belong. Heavy, labored breathing. The scrape of hooves on wood, and something that sounded almost like a groan. They all turned toward the front windows just as 2,000 pounds of Black Angus bull stumbled onto the front porch. The animal was massive, old, with a coat so dark it seemed to absorb light. But what made everyone freeze wasn't the bull itself. It was the blood. Fresh blood streaked down the bull's right flank in dark rivulets, matting the fur, dripping onto the white-painted porch boards. The bull's breathing was ragged, panicked, and its eyes, wild with pain, fixed on the window where the family sat paralyzed. Meu Deus, Rafael whispered, his paramedic training kicking in even as his mind struggled to process. That's Imperador, Pi's breeding bull. He's hurt bad. Imperador, their father's prize bull, the foundation of his breeding program, worth more than any 10 other animals on the property. António Carvalho had bought him as a calf 20 years ago and built an entire operation around his genetics. And now he was bleeding out on their front porch. But that's not what made Beatriz gasp. That's not what made Miguel stumble backward, knocking over a lamp. That's not what made Teresa grab her pregnant belly and stop breathing. Behind the bull, visible through the blood-streaked window, was a shadow. A human shadow. Tall, broad-shouldered, moving slowly in the twilight. The setting sun created a silhouette so perfectly backlit that no features were visible, just the outline of a large man standing perfectly still 10 feet behind the wounded animal. Someone's out there, Teresa whispered. Someone's behind him. The bull took another step forward, and the porch railing gave way with a crack of splintering wood. Imperador stumbled but didn't fall, his massive bulk swaying as he tried to maintain balance. The shadow didn't move, just stood there, watching the house, watching them. Who is that? Beatrice's voice had lost all its boardroom authority, reduced to pure fear. Rafael was already moving toward the door. Whoever it is hurt Imperador. Call 911, now. Wait! Miguel grabbed his arm. You don't know what's out there. What if he's armed? What if... That bull is worth $40,000, Beatriz said, her real estate brain somehow still calculating even in crisis. And he's dying. We need to... She stopped, because the shadow had moved. Not toward them, toward the bull. 1 step. 2. Close enough now that they could see more detail. Work boots, heavy canvas jacket, something dark covering the face. A mask? A hood? Imperador made a sound none of them had ever heard a bull make before, high-pitched, almost a whimper. The massive animal tried to move away from the shadow, but his injured leg gave out. He crashed through the rest of the porch railing, wood exploding in all directions, and fell heavily onto his side in the front yard. The shadow kept walking. Slow, methodical, no hurry at all. "He's going to kill him," Teresa said, her voice strangled. "Oh God, he's going to kill Imperador right in front of us." Miguel was on his phone, fingers shaking as he dialed 911. "Police. We need police. Carvalho Farm, Route 12. Someone's attacking our livestock. He's armed. I don't know. I can't see. Just send someone now." Rafael had grabbed their father's old hunting rifle from the closet, unloaded as it had been for years, but the intruder didn't know that. He threw open the front door and stepped onto what was left of the porch, raising the rifle even though his hands were shaking so badly he could barely hold it. "Stop right there," his voice cracked. "I'm armed. Sheriff's on the way. Don't take another step." The shadow stopped. For a long, terrible moment, nobody moved. The only sound was Imperador's labored breathing and the distant chirp of evening crickets. Then the figure reached up slowly and pulled back the hood. And every single person in the Carvalho family recognized the face that had haunted their guilt for 3 years. Joaquim Mendes, their father's ranch hand. The man António Carvalho had fired and destroyed. The man they'd all been too cowardly to defend. The man who'd lost everything because of their family's silence. He looked older, thinner. His face was weathered beyond his 53 years, marked by hardship they could only imagine. But his eyes, those dark, steady eyes that had watched their father's cruelty for 15 years, held something that made Rafael lower the rifle. Not anger, not vengeance, something worse. Grief. Joaquim looked at them standing there in the doorway of the house he'd never been allowed to enter. Looked at the destroyed porch, at Imperador struggling to breathe, at the family he'd served faithfully while they stood by and watched him be cast aside like garbage. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough, barely above a whisper, but it carried across the yard with devastating clarity. "Your father did this, 3 years ago, before he fired me, and I've been trying to fix it ever since." Then he knelt beside the dying bull, placed both hands on Imperador's heaving side, and began to cry. And in that moment, the Carvalho family realized they didn't know anything about what had really happened 3 years ago, about why their father had fired his most loyal worker, about what crime had been committed on this land, about what shadow had been following them all along. For 10 seconds, nobody moved. The Carvalho siblings stood frozen in the doorway, watching Joaquim Mendes, the man their father had destroyed, kneel beside the bleeding bull with tears streaming down his weathered face. Rafael finally broke the silence, lowering the rifle completely. "Joaquim, what did you mean? What did our father do?" Joaquim didn't look up. His hands moved gently across Imperador's flank, checking the wound with the practiced expertise of someone who'd spent decades caring for cattle. "The injury, it's not new. It's old. 3 years old. From the day your father fired me." "That's impossible," Miguel said, stepping off the porch. "We would have seen..." "You saw what Antonio wanted you to see." Joaquim's voice was bitter now, each word carrying years of suppressed rage. "This bull, Imperador, was the best breeding bull in 3 counties, your father's pride, his proof that he was smarter than everyone else." Beatriz moved closer, her business instincts warring with confusion. "What does that have to do with you being fired?" Joaquim finally looked up, his eyes meeting hers. "Everything. Because I was the one who discovered what your father had been doing. And when I confronted him, he made a choice. Destroy me, or admit the truth." Teresa, still on the porch, wrapped her arms around her pregnant belly. What truth? Imperador was sick, Joaquim said flatly. Not just sick, dying. A genetic condition that should have disqualified him from breeding 3 years ago. But your father knew if word got out, every calf sired by Imperador would be worthless. Every ranch that bought his genetics would sue. His entire operation would collapse. Miguel shook his head. No, Pi wouldn't. Your Pi did. Joaquim's voice rose. I found the veterinary reports he'd hidden. Dr. Helen Acosta warned him. Told him Imperador needed to be retired immediately, that continuing to breed him was not just unethical but criminal. But Antonio ignored her, paid her to stay quiet. And when I found the paperwork in his office, when I told him I couldn't be part of the lie anymore, he made his choice. Rafael's grip tightened on the rifle. He fired you to shut you up. Worse than that. Joaquim stood slowly, his knees cracking. He accused me of poisoning the cattle, told everyone in the county that I was stealing medication, selling it on the side, damaging his herd. Destroyed my reputation so thoroughly that no ranch within 200 miles would hire me. I lost my house, my savings, everything. Meu Deus, Teresa whispered. But I couldn't let it go, Joaquim continued, his voice breaking. Because I knew what was happening to Imperador, the genetic condition, it causes internal hemorrhaging, slow, progressive, painful. And your father kept breeding him anyway, knowing every month the bull was suffering more. Beatriz looked at the blood pooling beneath Imperador. So, this injury has been bleeding internally for 3 years, Joaquim finished. I've been coming here at night, every week, sneaking onto the property to give him medication, to ease his pain, to do what your father refused to do. I couldn't save my reputation, but I could save this animal from suffering. The words hung in the air like poison. Miguel dropped to his knees beside Imperador, his hand trembling as he touched the bull's heaving side. 3 years. You've been treating him secretly for 3 years? Every Tuesday and Friday night. After your father went to bed, I'd climb the fence, bring medication I could barely afford, treat the wound your Pi pretended didn't exist. Joaquim's voice cracked. And then 6 weeks ago, Antonio died. I thought maybe finally I could come forward, tell you the truth, save Imperador properly. But then tonight, I came to treat him and found him like this. The internal bleeding finally reached critical. He's dying because your father valued pride over mercy. Rafael set the rifle down completely. Why didn't you just call us? Tell us the truth when Pi died. Would you have believed me? Joaquim asked quietly. The man your father destroyed? The man he called a thief and a liar? Or would you have believed António Carvalho, respected rancher, pillar of the community, the man who convinced everyone I was garbage? No one answered. Because they all knew the truth. They wouldn't have believed him. They would have called the police, would have had him arrested for trespassing. Teresa started crying. Not from fear anymore, but from shame. I brought him to the house tonight because I wanted you to see, Joaquim said. Wanted you to know what your silence cost. Not just me, this animal. This innocent creature who suffered for 3 years because no one had the courage to challenge António Carvalho. Beatriz, always the pragmatist, pulled out her phone. I'm calling Dr. Costa. Right now. If there's any chance, there isn't. Joaquim knelt again, his hand gentle on Imperador's neck. I'm a ranch hand, not a veterinarian, but I know death when I see it. The kindest thing we can do now is let him go peacefully. Not alone in a field. Here. Where people finally see the truth. Miguel looked at his siblings, then at Joaquim. We're sorry. We should have defended you. Should have questioned Pi. Should have done a lot of things, Joaquim interrupted. But you didn't. And now we're here. In the distance, sirens wailed. The police Miguel had called, responding to a threat that no longer existed, or perhaps had never existed at all. Rafael walked to Joaquim and did something that shocked everyone, including Joaquim himself. He knelt beside him, placed his hand on Imperador's other side, and said quietly, Tell us how to help him, in whatever time he has left. Tell us what to do. And Joaquim Mendes, the man the Carvalho family had abandoned, began to speak. Dr. Helena Costa arrived 20 minutes before the police. She was 63 years old, with silver hair pulled back severely and eyes that had seen too many animals suffer at the hands of human greed. When she climbed out of her truck and saw Imperador lying in the Carvalho front yard, surrounded by the family and Joaquim Mendes, she stopped cold. "Meu Deus," she whispered. It finally happened. Beatriz approached her. "Doctor, Costa, can you save him?" Helena knelt beside the bull, her experienced hands moving over the wound with professional precision. She pulled out a stethoscope, checked his vitals, examined his eyes. After 3 minutes of silence, she sat back on her heels. "No, the internal hemorrhaging is catastrophic. Even if I had a full surgical team, which I don't, his organs are already failing. He has hours at best, maybe less." She looked at Joaquim. "How long have you been treating him?" 3 years, since Antonio found out about the condition and refused to stop breeding him." Helena's jaw tightened. "I told that stubborn bastardo, told him this would happen, but he cared more about money than—" She stopped, looking at the 4 siblings. "I'm sorry, but your father was warned, repeatedly." "We know," Miguel said quietly. "Joaquim told us everything." "Everything?" Helena's eyebrows rose. She looked at Joaquim with something like respect. "You told them about the false reports? The payments?" Joaquim nodded. "Then you're braver than I thought." Helena stood, brushing dirt from her knees. "Because Antonio didn't just pay me to stay quiet. He threatened me. Said if I told anyone about Imperador's condition, he'd report me to the veterinary board for malpractice, ruin my career like he ruined yours. I've been carrying that shame for 3 years. Teresa, still on the porch, spoke up. "You were afraid of him too. Terrified." Helena pulled out a syringe from her bag. "But I can do one thing right now. I can make sure he doesn't suffer anymore. This is a sedative, strong enough to let him drift away peacefully. It's the mercy your father should have given him 3 years ago." The Carvalho siblings exchanged glances. Finally, Beatriz nodded. "Do it." But Joaquim placed his hand on Helena's arm. "Wait. Let me say goodbye first." Helena handed him the syringe and stepped back. "You've earned that right more than anyone." Joaquim knelt once more beside Imperador. The massive bull's breathing had become shallow, labored. His eyes, once fierce and powerful, were glazing over. But when Joaquim placed both hands on his neck, Imperador made a low sound. Recognition. Trust. "I'm sorry," Joaquim whispered in Portuguese, his voice breaking. "Sorry I couldn't save you. Sorry I couldn't make them listen. Sorry you suffered because I wasn't strong enough to fight harder." Tears ran freely down his weathered face. The Carvalho siblings watched in silence, each of them confronting their own guilt, their own complicity in their father's cruelty. "You were a good bull," Joaquim continued. "The best I ever worked with. Strong, gentle, everything a breeding bull should be. You deserved better than this, better than Antonio, better than all of us." Rafael stepped forward and knelt on Imperador's other side. Then Miguel, then Teresa, moving slowly with her pregnant belly. Finally, Beatriz. All 5 of them surrounding the dying bull in the fading twilight. "We're sorry too," Rafael said. "We should have questioned our father, should have protected you, should have protected Joaquim." Imperador's breathing hitched, his massive body shuddered once. Joaquim looked at Helena and nodded. The veterinarian administered the injection with practiced gentleness. Within seconds, Imperador's labored breathing began to ease. The tension in his muscles relaxed. His eyes, which had been wild with pain, slowly closed. 2 minutes later, Imperador, the bull who had suffered in silence for 3 years while one man's pride mattered more than mercy, took his final breath. Joaquim buried his face in the bull's neck and sobbed, not quietly, not with dignity. He sobbed like a man releasing 3 years of helpless rage, grief, and injustice. And the Carvalho family, who had spent 40 minutes arguing about money and property and their father's legacy, finally understood what legacy really meant. It wasn't land or cattle or reputation. It was the choices you made when no one was watching. The people and animals you protected or abandoned. The truth you spoke or buried. Their father had chosen pride over mercy, profit over ethics, reputation over justice. And the shadow that had followed them all along wasn't Joaquim Mendes seeking revenge. It was their father's sins, finally catching up. When the police arrived 5 minutes later, they found a crime scene very different from what they'd expected. Not an attack, not a threat, just a family, a betrayed ranch hand, a dying veterinarian's guilt, and the body of a bull who'd been sacrificed on the altar of one man's arrogance. Sheriff deputies questioned everyone, took statements, examined the scene. But there was no crime to prosecute. Nothing illegal about what had happened tonight, except perhaps the 3-year conspiracy of silence that had led to this moment. As the officers left, Beatriz approached Joaquim, who was still kneeling beside Imperador's body. "Stay, please. We need to talk. About everything. About what our father did. About making this right." Joaquim looked up at her with eyes that had cried themselves empty. "There's no making this right. Imperador is dead. My reputation is destroyed. 3 years are gone." "No," Miguel said, joining his sister. "But we can start. We can tell the truth. We can restore your name. We can keep the farm," Rafael finished, "and hire you to run it. The right way. The way Pi should have done from the beginning." Joaquim stared at them. "You're serious." "Dead serious," Beatriz said. "We were arguing about selling because none of us wanted to face what this place represents. Our father's cruelty. But maybe that's exactly why we need to keep it. To transform it into something better. Something he should have built." Teresa nodded through her tears. "A place where animals are treated with mercy. Where workers are respected. Where profit doesn't matter more than principles." Joaquim looked down at Imperador one last time. Then slowly, he nodded. 3 days later, the Carvalho siblings stood in their father's office, a room none of them had entered since the funeral. Joaquim was with them, his presence both necessary and uncomfortable. They'd agreed to search for the hidden veterinary reports he'd mentioned, the proof of Antonio's deception. Miguel pulled open the filing cabinet. "Joaquim, where did you find the original documents?" "Bottom drawer, false bottom. Your father was thorough about hiding his crimes." Rafael knelt and examined the drawer. After a moment, he found the release mechanism. A hidden compartment clicked open. Inside were folders, dozens of them. But what spilled out wasn't just veterinary reports about Imperador. It was 3 years of documented evidence of Antonio Carvalho's systematic fraud. Beatriz picked up the first folder, her hands shaking. "Meu Deus, these are contracts. Sales records. Pi sold Imperador's genetics to 43 different ranches. 43 ranches bought defective bloodlines, defective calves that would develop the same hemorrhaging condition," Helen Acosta said from the doorway. She'd come at their request to verify the medical documents. "Some already have. I've treated 6 cases in the past year. The ranchers thought it was bad luck. They had no idea they'd been sold contaminated genetics." Teresa opened another folder. Letters. Threatening letters. Pi threatened 4 other veterinarians who questioned Imperador's health. And here, financial records. He paid off inspectors, falsified registration papers. This isn't just unethical. This is criminal fraud on a massive scale. Miguel sank into their father's chair, his face pale. How many animals? How many ranches did he destroy? Joaquim's voice was quiet. "I tried to warn him. Told him it would eventually come out. That's why he had to destroy me so completely. I was the only one who knew the full scope." "Not anymore," Beatriz said, her business mind already calculating. "This evidence, if we go public, it'll destroy Pi's reputation. Every sale will be contested. The lawsuits alone could bankrupt the estate." "Good," Rafael said sharply. "He deserves it. Even dead, he deserves to be exposed." "But the ranchers don't deserve to lose everything," Teresa countered. "The families who bought in good faith. The animals suffering from defective genetics. If we expose this without a plan, we create more victims." Joaquim walked to the window, looking out at the pastures where Imperador had lived and died. There's another folder, bottom of the stack. Antonio kept records of every calf Imperador sired, their locations, their buyers, their registration numbers. Miguel found it. Inside was a meticulously organized database. He tracked them, all of them. He knew exactly which animals carried the defect and where they were. He was going to wait until he died, Joaquim said. Let you inherit the problem. Let the truth come out after he couldn't be touched. That's why he kept the records. Insurance in case anyone came after the estate, he'd have documentation to shift blame. Helena examined the veterinary files. These reports show he knew 18 months before he fired Joaquim. He could have recalled the genetics, warned the buyers, done the ethical thing. Instead, he doubled down, sold more, made more money, and planned his exit. Beatriz looked at her siblings. We have a choice. We bury this like Pi wanted, protect his name, and let innocent ranchers keep suffering. Or we expose everything, accept the consequences, and try to make it right. There's no choice, Miguel said. We expose it, all of it. Rafael nodded. Agreed. Teresa, tears streaming down her face, whispered, He was our father, and he was a monster. We tell the truth. They looked at Joaquim. This will vindicate you, Beatriz said. Prove everything you said was true. Destroy everyone who called you a liar. Joaquim was quiet for a long moment. Then he picked up the folder with Imperador's bloodline records. We do this right. We contact every rancher. We offer genetic testing for their herds. We compensate them for losses. We don't just expose Antonio. We fix what he broke. That'll cost millions, Beatriz calculated. Then we sell the land if we have to, Miguel said. But we make this right. Rafael extended his hand to Joaquim. You were the only one with integrity 3 years ago. We need you to lead this, not us. You. Joaquim looked at the hand, then at the 4 siblings who'd stood silent while their father destroyed him. Finally, he shook it. Not for Antonio, not even for me, for Imperador, and every animal that suffered because of one man's greed. Outside, the sun set over Carvalho Farm. The shadow that had haunted them was gone, but the hard work of redemption was just beginning. The scandal had been brutal. National news coverage, lawsuits from 43 ranches, criminal investigations into Antonio's fraud. The Carvalho name, once respected, became synonymous with deception. But something else happened too. Joaquim Mendes, publicly vindicated, became the face of ethical ranching reform. His testimony before the State Agriculture Board led to new regulations protecting genetic integrity. Ranchers who'd called him a liar apologized publicly. His reputation wasn't just restored, it was elevated. The family sold half the land to create a compensation fund for affected ranches. The remaining 100 acres became Fazenda Imperador, a non-profit sanctuary for retired breeding animals managed by Joaquim. Beatriz left real estate development to run the foundation full-time. Miguel used his university connections to develop genetic screening protocols. Rafael trained other ranch hands in ethical animal care. And Teresa, who gave birth to a daughter 3 months earlier, named her Helena, after the veterinarian who'd finally found her courage. On the 6-month anniversary of Imperador's death, they gathered at his memorial. Joaquim placed fresh flowers at the stone, his weathered hands gentle. We received the last test results yesterday, Beatriz told him. All 43 herds have been screened. 18 animals carried the defect. All have been retired to sanctuaries with full compensation to the owners. And the lawsuits? Joaquim asked. Settled. Everyone. We're broke, but everyone affected has been made whole. She smiled sadly. Pi's legacy is gone, but maybe that's the point. Miguel nodded. His real legacy was teaching us what not to be. What not to value, what not to sacrifice for pride. A truck pulled up, Dr. Helena Costa arriving with a young bull in the trailer. This is Esperanza, she announced, rescued from a breeding operation that was repeating your father's mistakes. Joaquim, he's yours now, first resident of the new sanctuary. Joaquim approached the trailer. The young bull, healthy, strong, with clear eyes, looked at him with trust António Carvalho had never earned from any animal. Esperanza, Joaquim repeated. Hope. Rafael put his hand on Joaquim's shoulder. That's what you gave us. When that shadow appeared behind Imperador, we thought it was vengeance coming. But it was redemption. You could have destroyed us. Instead, you showed us how to be better. Teresa held baby Helena up to see the new bull. She'll grow up knowing this story, knowing that her family's greatest moment wasn't building an empire. It was tearing one down to tell the truth. As the sun set over Fazenda Imperador, Joaquim led Esperanza to the pasture where Imperador had taken his last breath. The young bull would live the life the old bull deserved, cared for with mercy, valued for more than genetics, allowed to exist without exploitation. The shadow that had frozen the Carvalho family 6 months ago wasn't their enemy. It was their salvation. Because sometimes the most terrifying thing isn't what's coming for you in the dark. It's the truth you've been running from finally catching up. And the only way to survive it is to stop running and face what you've become. The Carvalho family had faced their father's sins. They'd paid the price. And in doing so, they'd found something Antonio never had. Not wealth, not reputation, not pride, integrity. And that was a legacy worth keeping. The wounded bull crashes through the porch railing, blood everywhere, and behind it, a shadow, a man, standing perfectly still, watching us. We're 4 siblings arguing over our dead father's farm when 2,000 pounds of dying livestock appears at our door. The bull is Imperador, worth $40,000, bleeding out in front of us, but it's the figure behind him that makes us freeze. Tall, silent, face hidden in twilight. My brother grabs a rifle. My sister calls 911. The pregnant one can't breathe. None of us understand what's happening or why this person brought a dying bull to our family meeting. Then the shadow pulls back his hood, and we recognize the face immediately. Joaquim Mendes, our father's ranch hand. The man Dad destroyed 3 years ago, fired, ruined, accused of crimes he didn't commit. We all stood silent while it happened. Now he's back, kneeling beside the bull, crying. And he says 5 words that shatter everything we thought we knew. Your father did this. What we discover in the next hour will expose a 3-year conspiracy of fraud, cruelty, and systematic cover-ups that destroyed 43 ranches and condemned innocent animals to suffering. The shadow we feared wasn't coming for revenge. It was bringing us the truth we'd been too cowardly to face. And when the buried evidence finally comes to light, it won't just destroy our father's legacy, it'll force us to choose between protecting his lies or becoming the people he never was.